On December 14th, 2012, a 20-year-old man armed with a Bushmaster assault rifle and a 10mm Glock pistol walked unopposed into Sandy Hook Elementary School, where he savagely murdered 28 students and staff members within just 5 minutes. Before first responders could arrive, Adam Peter Lanza committed suicide and left Americans with nothing to do but mourn and clamor for legislative action. It was a truly terrible tragedy, but mass shootings and violence in general represent an unfortunate commonality in our society. Whether it's a nightclub, Planned Parenthood, or a school campus, it seems like we hear about death and disturbance everywhere we go. I don't claim to have the silver bullet that will stop the carnage, but sadly some people like to take these tragic situations and use them to validate their own agendas and confirmation biases. You would think that pundits describing the tragedies we hear about on a day-to-day basis are there to inform us. But upon further rhetorical analysis and review, most commentators speaking about gun violence are speaking to manipulate. We've heard it all. It was the guns, ban the guns, or it was radical Islam, ban Muslims. But the most common thing I hear blamed is one of the things we enjoy most: video games. Comprehensive studies have been done on video games, but at this point, they're practically useless. One moment you'll find a study that says there's no link between violence and video games. The next minute you'll find an article that says video games are the devil, and then you'll find an article that just doesn't know what its standpoint is and just wants your money. No matter how many studies are done, we can be sure at the very least that video games are protected by the First Amendment. In fact, they have been protected since June of 2011, when the Supreme Court ruled that video games are to be treated as forms of creative art. Unfortunately for us, this doesn't stop people from both sides of the political spectrum from railing on video games. Whether it's senators at a hearing, local representatives, or the orange delivery man, pandering for support seems to coincide with attacking video games. But why? After the Video Game Rating Act of 1994 was passed, enemies of video games got exactly what they wanted: legislative action and regulation in the gaming industry. Now, don't get me wrong, I think the Video Game Rating Act was beyond successful. It created a fair rating system that allowed developers to keep their creative freedoms and helped legitimize the gaming industry in the eyes of the country. It was a really monumental solution. But of course, for people that are hell-bent on finding a scapegoat for their problems, a solution doesn't even matter. Although video games are protected by a Supreme Court decision, angry activists all over the country will find reasons to attack something that, to be quite honest, they hate for no reason. Just look at one of these news interviews regarding video games. A woman with no experience on Mass Effect was brought in to attack a game she had never even played. How about these two brothers that came on live television just to throw away a perfectly good collection of video games? This constant negative portrayal leaves us gamers in a bit of a tight situation. We can't rely on studies that are too vague and inconsistent. Most of our lawmakers will say anything to get elected, and uninformed people are being touted as representatives of the vulgar gaming industry. So how can I prove that video games don't directly cause violence? Well, I've been thinking about this, and I think the best way to approach this situation is to talk about how video games have impacted me. If you know me, you know I am a huge Final Fantasy fan. Hell, I put Cloud on the thumbnail. But the game series itself represents a perfect example of violence in video games done right. Unlike previous installments in the series, Final Fantasy VII actually includes a lot of blood. The dead monster corpses, the bloody walls in the Shinra headquarters, and the on-screen death create a pretty horrific image in the mind. But when this seemingly pointless slaughter is coupled with the storytelling mastery of Hironobu Sakaguchi, the effects can actually be positive. We know that the main villain in Final Fantasy VII, Sephiroth, is a bad dude, but we get to see just how evil he is when he slaughters President Shinra and manages to kill a ferocious monster with a wooden pike. We loved having Eris on the team, but we didn't realize how much her character meant to us until she was gone. The violence doesn't have to make you uncomfortable. It doesn't have to desensitize a person. It can actually make us more sensitive and more aware of the terror around us. Instead of viewing our female friends as objects of desire, games like Final Fantasy VII and others teach us that women are just as integral to the story as men and can be portrayed with full artistic freedom. Instead of being told that our party is facing slim odds, we are shown painful reminders of violence that elicit genuine emotion. Now, to be fair, I am picking cherries. When senators like Leland Yee attack video games, they don't go after Final Fantasy. But they also do cherry picking because they go after obvious targets like GTA and other modern style shooters. And while this produces decent publicity for the games, I still find it necessary to clear the confusion. Actually, I'm not even that much of a GTA fan, but I will admit that it is a terribly violent game. As soon as you're set free, you have complete freedom to commit heinous crimes like murder and prostitution. But I think the key word here is free. Unlike most people who will say, oh, it's just a game, I want to take the argument a step further and say, it is more than a game. It is a game intended for mature audiences that can actually offer insight on what not to do in the real world. See, GTA doesn't beg you to go murder someone. In fact, if you do that, you will most likely be tracked down by the cops, who will promptly open fire and destroy you. I think the biggest misconception about gaming is that parents think the industry is on some kind of conspiracy to poison the minds of the young. And while the scumbag that was Adam Peter Lanza may have enjoyed playing games like GTA, you can't point to video games as the source of his motivation. So stop looking solely and only for something to blame. No matter your partisanship or your political affiliation, we have to look for a solution, not a scapegoat. Do I have a solution? Unfortunately, no. But with the facts at hand, I'm hoping you guys will take action to end this calculated hatred of video games. While I completely acknowledge that video games can be violent, I also want others to acknowledge that this violence may not always be aimed to influence the minds of other people. Video games are more than just scapegoats, and to see them constantly bashed is truly unfortunate. Anyway, that's all for today. Let me know what you thought, stay tuned for future reviews, and thank you so much for watching.